Origins. I'm your host, Ralph Newell, and today we have with us Dr. Stephanie Rodriguez, the director of the STEM Opportunity Alliance at AAAS, the American Association for the Advancement of Science. Welcome, Dr. Rodriguez.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Yeah. I had the pleasure of meeting you a few months ago at the STEM Opportunity Alliance workshop that you hosted on higher education and post-secondary success. And we will definitely talk a lot more about that later. But first and foremost, I wanted to get into letting the audience learn a little more about you. So you are from South Bend, Indiana.
I am. I'm
What's
a,
it
I'm a
like
Hoosier,
growing up
born
there?
and raised.
You're a Hoosier, born and raised. Hoosier or Fighting Irish?
Oh, well, as at the state level, we are all Indiana Hoosiers. But I did grow up in South Bend, right near Notre Dame.
Yeah. So as a child, what was it like growing up there?
It was, I think, a pretty typical Midwestern experience. I moved around a lot as a kid. So I went
Mhm.
to school in kind of a lot of neighboring areas, not just South Bend. It was really kind of just focused on playing sports and figuring out what it was that I wanted to do in my career. Ultimately, though, I learned about a unique high school in Indiana called the Indiana Academy of Science, Mathematics, and Humanities. It's a state-sponsored boarding school, essentially.
Yeah.
And so spent my last 2 years of high school in Indiana on Ball State campus in Muncie, Indiana. They're doing, taking college courses, finishing high school, and also that's where I started to first get experiences working in research laboratories. So think it was pretty typical, and then learned about this really amazing opportunity in central Indiana and was able to finish out high school in that area.
Oh, interesting, interesting. So when you got there, or was it prior to that? What in your childhood sparked your interest in science? What was your earliest memory of that?
Well, I had always been a curious kid, and I really thought that I wanted to be a lawyer. I
Okay.
was always in the weeds on things. I liked to argue. So I thought law might be the path I took. And what actually kind of changed courses for me was having a really fantastic teacher in one of my science courses. It was a genetics course at the Indiana Academy, and he was a recent PhD graduate. He had a lot of excitement and experience, and he brought in real hands-on lab equipment and started exposing us to what it was like to do basic research. And I was really interested in that. I actually quit the volleyball team so that I could join the sort of late night lab course. And he really just sparked my interest. I don't think I didn't know any scientists. There were no scientists in my family. I
Mhm.
really only thought about medical careers as a path in science. And so this was the first time I realized that there was just this entire wide world of careers and occupations that were tied to science, but weren't necessarily being a medical doctor. And so I definitely credit Dr. Greg, Mr. Greg from the Academy for really opening up my eyes to that. And he actually helped me get access to a paid summer research experience while I was
Mhm.
in high school in a biochemistry lab there on campus. And so it really was the sort of door that opened for me in those last 2 years of high school that really sparked my interest.
But just looking back on it, besides, that experience there, was there anything else growing up that may have led you to science? Anything your parents did, your family did?
Well, I was definitely always interested. Also, I come from my grandparents are dairy farmers.
Okay.
So we have a lot of exposure on the farm in sort of agricultural sciences. And then also watching sort of how your family navigates health challenges, different things that are starting to happen. So we had some Alzheimer's happening in our family at that time. And so I became more and more interested in the genetics and the things behind that at the same time where I was getting access to, a teacher who really kind of sparked my interest in that research in that area. So I think it's sort of like watching kind of science in action as a young person, sort of seeing how kind of medical marvels are really
Hmm.
impacting my family, and then kind of that opportunity then open to explore that more deeply.
So after you left Ball State, the high school program, you went to undergrad at Stanford, right?
I did.
And then got your PhD in immunology at WashU.
Yeah, Washington University in St. Louis. Mhm.
Yeah. Which I was on their campus a couple of years ago. Actually, more than a couple of years ago. I guess 5 years ago, because this is when my daughter was looking at colleges. That was one she was looking at. But interesting thing about WashU, which I didn't know, that the Olympics were held there.
I don't think I knew that either.
You didn't know that either? No, I was on campus. It was like a placard there. I think in 1912, something like that. The Olympics were in St. Louis, which I never even knew. And that I want to say the university, like the stadium or something there was like the host, like
Oh.
the opening ceremonies or something like that. Anyway, I guess interesting factoid. They don't even, you didn't even see that on campus, huh?
Well, and I was on the medical campus for
Right,
my
right.
PhD program, so I didn't get over to the Danforth campus all the time. So I'm assuming that was
Oh,
on main campus where that was, but
yeah,
it's
exactly.
beautiful. Yeah.
So you studied immunology. So I heard some of that, some of that stuff in your background, but then from at least from what I'm reading, when you got out of school, you didn't even really work in that field.
We're like, are you still a scientist if you work in policy and
Yeah,
education
yeah.
programming? And I think very much yes. It was an interesting transition. And I think when you talk to people, their careers take them a lot of different places,
Right.
expected and unexpected. And for me, I worked in labs. I mean, I mentioned to you, I started working in labs in high school and I worked in a lab all throughout college. I did my PhD program in a basic research laboratory. And but at that same time, while I was studying CD4 T cells and the homeostasis of your immune system, I was also volunteering with community groups that created more exposure and opportunities for kids in the St. Louis public school system to get engaged in research experiences in high school, similar to the ones that really sparked my interest when I was in high school. And it was that volunteerism and leading this organization called the Young Scientist Program while I was at WashU that started getting me more and more interested in not just science, but the way science as a career and the way science as a pathway open up so much opportunity and potential for people. And if I look back on my own journey, so much of that felt lucky.
Mhm.
I didn't know about that high school. I happened to have a teacher who was passionate. I managed to get into this paid research experience because I wasn't doing anything that wasn't paid in the summer months. And all of that felt really lucky. And I think for me, I have always wanted to figure out a way to take the luck out of all of that opportunity. And so being engaged in some longstanding community programs that help teachers, help students, help families get more connected to science was really rewarding to me. It was the first grant I wrote was not necessarily on my CD4 T cell research, but it was an NSF education grant to support the Young Scientist program and the way we were bringing high school kids into our labs. And so it was this really kind of for me in my career and kind of how that inspired me to move after graduate school, it was a moment of realizing that there's a role for me as a scientist at the intersection of science and learning and work. And wanting to be a part of that really important intersection
Mhm.
became kind of how I have focused my career since finishing my PhD.
Yeah. So you mentioned NSF. You ended up being a fellow there. Looking at the landscape today, what trends do you see shaping the future of science, and how are you guys helping to prepare students and leaders and the community about it?
Mm. Well, I mean, it's a challenging moment right now with changes that are happening in terms of research funding, and I think what sometimes folks don't fully appreciate is
Hmm.
that the funding and the grants for research awards do invest a ton in research, and they're also how researchers are able to do things like travel and attend convenings, bring high school students into their labs for summer research experiences, and do that sort of holistic science engagement work. And so right now, we're obviously watching very carefully to see how changes in funding systems are going to impact the ability to not just do tremendous research and innovation inside of the lab, but also sort of those holistic ways that the R&D ecosystem are a part of career exposures and role modeling and sort of disseminating what is effective from inside of the labs. I think one trend that we are seeing and that we're gonna continue to see is that scientists aren't just in labs. Scientists are working in all sorts of places and spaces, private sector research, but also doing things like policy work, research and evaluation work, and really starting to lead right these innovation engines. And so a trend that we can continue to expect is that folks who are pursuing higher level education in the sciences are going to have even more diverse careers that they're going to be stepping into, bringing that data driven thinking, that problem solving, that analytic mindset into different parts of our economy. And I think that's a great thing. It also means that those of us who are doing the work to help people who are in their training pathways start to imagine what is available to them mean that we have to keep up, right, with what those opportunities are. I think even since I finished my graduate program, I see even at WashU more and more attempts by faculty to play a part in exposing graduate students to a diverse array of careers, not just academia. And that
Mhm.
definitely is a shift from even when I was in graduate school.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, you actually segued into an area I was going to go into next with you. That we are in trying times with the attack on science and the accompanying research. You know, we talked a little bit about NSF, but also look at other organizations like NEA. But what do you think about what's going to be the impact of all these funding cuts that have happened under the current administration?
I mean, I think that there's going to be some devastating impacts. Part of what we look for as we're deciding, are we going to go into a PhD program? What are we pursuing after we get maybe a bachelor's degree? Is about stability. It's about sort of where you're going to be able to make a research and an innovation impact. And when those things become more uncertain, when there are fewer slots available in research labs, we're definitely going to start to see a funneling effect, right? And we already know the data around demographic representation in higher education and postdoctoral careers and faculty positions. And so, as we continue to work to make sure talent from every single community, that folks that look like me, that folks that represent their communities are
Mhm.
in faculty teaching positions, are in research positions, are in all of the occupations, that becomes even more challenging when the ability to provide exposure and career exposure opportunities, things like I experienced in high school, become more and more challenging. And so it's not just going to have an impact on the actual research that's happening right now, it's going to have downstream impacts on the talent pipeline and sort of the pool who are coming in. And so I think we all should be really paying attention to this. We need to continue to have an excellent research enterprise, and that means that everything needs to continue to be invested in, from early engagement and curiosity in K-12 learning all the way through workforce development opportunities.
Right, right. So, I mean, you talk about workforce development makes me think about community colleges. So obviously, a lot of this funding, especially like coming from NSF, NEA, will have a dramatic effect on universities. What about community colleges? What do you think the impact is there?
Well, I think we've been seeing more and more attention on community colleges over the last 5 to 10 years. I think as
Mhm.
we start to see more and more focus on apprenticeship programs, on short-term training. We just held a webinar a few weeks ago where we were talking about what STEM occupations are, and in the current estimates, more
Mhm.
than 50% of STEM occupations do not require a 4-year degree. They're in, STEM powered manufacturing and skilled technical occupations. And so the role of community colleges is essential. And I think it's going to be really critical that we lean on, partner with, and really understand the value of community colleges, both as a place where folks are maybe getting dual credit, dual enrollment, and then transitioning on to 4-year learning,
Mhm.
and where they're getting certifications and on the job training and access to apprenticeship programs. And sometimes these parts of community colleges can be siloed from one another. And
Right.
so, for those of us working, especially in STEM, in advanced IT, and sort of thinking about the merger of those occupations and opportunities, is going to require new types of relationships and partnerships with community colleges. Not just on the transfer and articulation side of the
Mhm.
institution, but also on the training and certification side. And I think that those can be new relationships. And so that it is really an opportunity. And it's one where we can't sort of assume that the
Mhm.
existing relationships that we've had that were really focused on transfer and articulation agreements are the same ones that are going to be successful in establishing real partnerships around certification and apprenticeship.
I wanted to bring all that up really just sort of as a background and as sort of a segue to get into, actually, kind of what we're here to talk about is the STEM Opportunity Alliance, which you were named the director of just last year. So, if you can you tell our audience exactly what the STEM Opportunity Alliance is all about?
Absolutely. So the STEM Opportunity Alliance is a national coalition of partners from all sectors. And we are working together to implement what was a community developed national strategy for excellence and prosperity in STEM.
Hmm.
And it's over 280 organizations really ultimately trying to ready the waters for 20 million more diverse workers in the STEM economy by 2050. And fundamentally, we know that reaching a workforce goal doesn't just require workforce stakeholders. It requires an entire trajectory of learning, engagement, and experiences to have a strong pool of talent who are succeeding and interested in joining occupations in the STEM economy. And so, as a coalition, we're really focused on bridging between early engagement, K-12 learning, higher education and post-secondary success, and workforce development, really getting all of those systems aligned and operating so that we have seamless pathways through learning to STEM careers. And so we are a very diverse coalition, from education institutions, philanthropy, community organizations, really, who may typically specialize in one part of this really rich journey, but know that we must be well aligned to have this more force multiplying effect, so that once you get super excited as a kid about science, you actually do have those opportunities to continue to pursue that journey.
So, I mean, you talked about increasing the workforce by 20 million folks by 2050. So when we go back now, I mean, it's changed to me. Some of the conversations that we had at your workshop a few months ago, I think would be different today
Mm,
than they were a couple months ago. Just looking at how some of these things have played out.
mm,
When we look at all the funding cuts that we talked about right now for research, that's some of that's going to. I think you alluded to it earlier as well. Kill the pipeline, or at least not kill the pipeline, but
yeah.
impact it. So what you guys were doing and thinking about doing just a few months ago, has it changed in any way with the current landscape?
I think it has changed in a few ways. So, for the coalition, we're really thinking about new ways of working together within our
Mhm.
wheelhouse, but aligned. And right now, when you're really feeling the pressure, and especially in higher ed, which is being uniquely impacted right now, That
Hmm.
means there's a little less capacity to do strategic partnership work. That means that people are really having to focus on risk mitigation and in addressing immediate challenges. That
Right.
means that there's a little less energy and capacity available to thinking in an innovative way about new partnership creation.
Right.
But the core pieces that we were discussing at our workshop in Minnesota were
Hmm.
really around how do we enable student success? How do we enable faculty success? And what do we need to do to really shift the needle there? And we know that those strategies are still effective, that things like addressing weed out course culture or ensuring that STEM learning cultures are inclusive and welcoming and also lead to real outcomes are all still things that students and ultimately faculty will need to be successful. What it also means is that for us at AAAS, we know that right now the community in a lot of ways needs resources and intelligence and a space where they can be in community with one another to discuss strategies that are effective in this moment and to not lose steam moving ahead. So, for example, we've been still doing things like hosting technical assistance webinars. We had
Hmm.
over 2,300 folks join a webinar specifically around how to navigate NSF grant terminations. So
Hmm.
these are real time opportunities that as AAAS and as sort of the backbone of this coalition, we're able to understand, what is the real time need that our institution partners are navigating in this moment. It's grant terminations, it's reductions in indirect cost rates that are going to impact their labs, and do technical assistance and resource development specifically to help them navigate those moments of need. And so we think that that is an important role for the AAAS backbone to be able to offer. And we're thinking about that across all of our sort of focal areas in our
Hmm.
strategy. But that also means that we may have to wait a few months, right, to
Hmm.
start getting those conversations going around what new and creative alliances among big partners might look like, while at the same time really meeting everybody where they are in this moment where they're really trying to keep their labs open, make sure students are successful, and kind of navigating a lot of that chaos that's being caused in the policy arena right now.
When you talk about when your grants have been terminated, in a lot of these cases, people don't realize some of these people have done 80% of the work, 90% of the work, they're 50% there. Any strategies for you guys working with on some of these folks of how to complete that work?
We do. We have a cadre of partners, including some philanthropic partners who are helping, right, to get those sort of like all but report type
Hmm.
grants across the finish line. So we've been working with our partners to identify those in the last minutes or at the end, right, the end points. All
Right.
the data is collected, and now the report needs to get out and connecting them with those other partners because really because SOA is a cross-sector coalition, we're able to do some of that matchmaking between groups who the core of their work is the answer to the need of another group's work. And so we have been doing a bit of that matchmaking and helping in some bespoke ways to help pull those pieces together, and have obviously been kind of having these conversations at a coalition level as well, where even on a philanthropy side, they're trying to imagine what do they do in coalition with other philanthropers to sort of offer that sort of resource to the community.
Yeah. Again, talking about funding, and not sure how much you've had a chance to really look into this, but when we looked at the legislation that just passed last week, the big beautiful bill or whatever it was called, there's going to be a huge impact. Some believe on minority students going to college, the ability to get loans and things like that. Have you taken a look at that and thought about that, especially as it relates to your goal of increasing the number of diverse workforce members in STEM?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's something that we're all looking at, and we're even inside of AAAS talking with our colleagues in our Office of Government Relations and other places about where there are advocacy moments where we can make clear kind of what the needs are and where those opportunities are. We know that things like shifts in Pell Grants, things like that,
Hmm.
are definitely going to change the way everybody is navigating higher education. We have partners, including some that I think you've interviewed on your podcast, that work in the business of helping students get across the finish line in their careers, in their education journeys, and so doing more, right, to make sure that we're matching again across partner groups. And I think that you're right. We are concerned about what the impact that this is going to have on all students, especially students who are already experiencing those barriers to entry. Thinking about, what opportunities are there for private sector to support things like graduate research fellowships, or the evolution of what those look like, are all things that we're doing, having conversations around and creating strategies around.
You talked a lot about your partners. Can you talk about maybe I don't want to you have to single someone out at the expense of someone else, but what are some of the key collaborations or partners that you guys are working with? Collaborators rather.
Well, we have a lot of great collaborators. I mean, we have over 280 partner
Okay.
organizations, that are aligned with this vision of the STEM Opportunity Alliance. Our core partners we call anchor partners, and we work with them in sort of the day to day. They're network weavers and visionaries. They're groups like the STEM Next Opportunity Fund, or national ecosystems that have footprints in every single state. And so we have these core partnerships that we're working on that are about how do we start to do this sort of whole system wide thinking in a place based way. But in the day to day, we're doing things like connecting partners like Jobs for the Future, who are experts in workforce development, with our partners in the out of school time space. We're
Mm.
thinking about how to bring a registered apprenticeship that FHI 360 have federally registered, focused on youth development professionals, in helping that apprenticeship program be a solution to talent needs in the out of school and after school time spaces. And so really thinking about how you harness the specific expertise, like the University Innovation Alliance and the work that they're doing to eliminate dropout and withdraw and weed out courses, and expanding those strategies more broadly. So it really is about understanding the partner organizations sort of superpowers, and bringing them together in ways that then bridge silos across the STEM journey.
When you look at your corporate partners, did you guys lose any corporate partners over the anti-DEI fervor?
We haven't lost any partners. Now, some partners have changed their commitment statements or modified their language, to be more
Mhm.
in alignment with this moment, and
Right.
what their risk tolerance is around the way they're talking about their work. But we have not lost any corporate partners. I think you and I met, at 3M's campus in Minnesota, and they continue, right, to be supportive of the research and innovation work that we are doing, and that we're doing in partnership with them.
Right.
And what we're also seeing is more of a refinement in how corporate partners are thinking about what it is that they want to be doing.
Mm.
Certainly more folks thinking about career pathways and what it looks like to really support the development of more AI focused opportunities that are strategic and tied to real jobs. What I see happening right now is almost like a refinement of focus on the intersection between education and careers, in a way that is becoming more and more place based than, let's say, broad coalition efforts, sign on letters, and things like that, getting more specific about where we want to do the work. But that said, budgets are shrinking, right? Like, I think that there is this reality where everyone is becoming more lean in the STEM education ecosystem space. And
Mhm.
what that means is that it's even more important than ever that things like like our coalition, where we're really meant to align partners doing great work,
Mm.
and figuring out how to share resources and assets so that we can have, a force multiplier effect, a higher impact. It is even more important as all of our organizations become more and more lean in response to this moment.
Gosh, I was caught up there. I almost lost my train of thought. Everything we've been talking about just recently here is about challenges that are now being faced because of the changing landscape. But prior to, that sea change, what were the other challenges that you guys faced that you felt in developing this strategy?
The challenges that existed before are still the challenges, right? Now there's sort of these added I'm going to use the word distraction, even though they're very real, not to minimize, but
Hmm.
it takes your attention, right? When
Yeah.
you are having to navigate very real things happening on your campuses, grants being terminated, funding being lost, that is an immediate need that requires being addressed. At the same time, as an education community, we know that we haven't seen huge shifts that we're looking to see. If we're looking at enrollment rates and completion rates in STEM programs, we haven't seen the increases that we need to see and the success rates that we need to see to meet the needs, right, of the workforce. And so things like student success and faculty success, the challenges that existed in there, like navigating the financial aid gauntlet, creating more belonging in STEM training pathways. Those are still the things that need to happen at the same time that folks are having to spend time scrubbing their websites and sort of reacting to these policy changes. So we know that, for SOA, the strategy is a 25-year horizon, because we know that it is going to take time on task to really align partners and systems in a way that then can create more seamless journeys. And by nature, you're going to have to navigate changes in political dynamics. What's happening, I don't think anybody could have predicted the severity that would happen right now with anti-DEI, with the changes, the attack on science and
Hmm.
education. I don't know that we could have predicted the severity of that,
Yeah.
but we did know that there will always be a pendulum shift, and that we're going to have to stay the course. And a coalition like SOA is meant to offer that sort of beacon, that sustained beacon that we're all striving toward in terms of the vision of where we need to be to reach our goals.
You hit on something there that I was thinking about earlier, the attack on science. A lot of it, I think, is, political attack, if you will. When I look at stuff that Secretary Kennedy is talking about, with Health and Human
HHS.
Services, all the stuff they want to change there and getting rid of vaccines, et cetera, deniers of climate change and all of that. What type of impact do you think that has had on the broader science community when it comes to trying to recruit new people?
That's what I was sort of alluding to earlier, is
Hmm.
that it puts hesitation in the minds of people who are thinking about pursuing these fields. Most researchers are not getting into their research study because they want to be political activists necessarily, or that they want to be storytellers. But I
Hmm.
think what this moment has demonstrated is how essential it is that even in a research institution or as researchers, that we are able to talk about the value of the work that we do in a way that can resonate with folks. I think that a few things are going to be true, is that people are going to question if they want to be in these fields, if they're secure, if there's a future in them, and if their innovations will be respected, right? I think that those are all questions that are going to impact people's decision making. And I think we'll always have folks who want to be involved in the scientific enterprise. The question is, do we make it possible? And do we have the sort of opportunities in place where folks like me, who thought they were going to be a lawyer, but turns out they should be a scientist, really actually get the opportunity to realize that for themselves? In a future that's becoming more and more and more technology enabled, we know that those like basic science literacies, basic STEM skills are going to be
Hmm.
required across the board. But getting to that next level where you actually want to be in the lab, want to be doing the research and development, that requires more curation. The moment right now is going to dissuade some people, and it will empower, it'll like spark some fire in others.
When you talk about your coalitions, the people you guys collaborate with, and I'm saying that generically in the science community, if you will, but it's happening in other sectors too. I read this article, and it was an article that I just kind of glanced read, if you know what I mean. It was talking about, and I think it was in Germany. Some German colleges and universities were talking about and making and offering American scientists and college professors to come over there and teach and do their research, et cetera, et cetera. Has there been talk about any type of international collaboration like that, or expanding the borders, if you will, to get this work done? Have you heard any of that?
So in terms of our partners at the STEM Opportunity Alliance, some of them are very much working in a global setting, doing things around ecosystem building, mentorship, sort of cross-pollination of stakeholders and
Hmm.
partners. And so certainly within some wheelhouses. Now for our vision setting and SOA, we have a domestic agenda, and we know that that exists in a worldwide context. And I think some of the best things about science are the ways that science opens up opportunities for worldwide collaborations and sort of the exchange, right, that happens as you're working in science. And so I think that we will see more of that. I'll even say, as we're looking at what's happening with the skilled technical workforce, with apprenticeships, so much of what we are thinking about, even inside of the Department of Labor and other places, are learning, right, from European countries and places where they have long-standing apprenticeship systems that aren't just focused on trades, that like has typically been the case in the United States. And so I think there's a ton of learning that's happening. I think what you're alluding to is sort of almost the danger, right, that the United States is going to lose scientific expertise when people decide to go overseas and bring their talents to bear in different places because of the environment in the United States, and that very well may be happening, right?
Right. Let's hope not. But I mean, let's hope there's a better day.
Yeah.
Closing thoughts. What advice or how would you direct people who now heard about what you guys are doing who want to have their organizations help out or participate, or them as individuals? How would they get involved?
You can go to STEMopportunityalliance.org to learn more about all that we're up to. And I think I would say that if your organization is involved in helping people get from curiosity to learning to career in STEM, then there are resources and community available inside of the STEM Opportunity Alliance. And what we're really going to be asking folks to think about is, how do we align the work that we're doing so that there aren't drop off points, so that you have a seamless opportunity no matter where you are, no matter what zip code, to get curious and then to pursue learning and training in STEM fields. So definitely go to STEMopportunityalliance.org to learn more about the work we're doing. The other thing you can do is really unpack our national strategy document, because over 1,500 experts spent over 2 years really pouring in to the vision, and it talked about evidence-based best practices across every stage of the STEM journey and ways that we can start to make progress on student success, faculty success, and everything in between. So definitely visit the website and check that out, because we would love to have you join our coalition, and think about really how you want to roll up your sleeves strategically to join the vision.
The thing you just mentioned, you can take a look at the 2 years worth of research. Is that the strategy you guys came up? We had 5 pillars that you're looking at. Yeah.
Yes.
Could you tell them about the 5 pillars that sort of structure this thing?
Yeah, of course. The STEM Opportunity Alliance strategy is, like you said, Ralph, built around 5 pillars, and a couple extra pieces. So we start thinking about early learning and engagement in the K-12 space. This is everything around curiosity, out of school time, coursework in K-12 education. And then we have a pillar focused exclusively on educators, the role of informal and in-school educators in providing that inspiration and the supports that they need to be successful. There's a focal area around higher education and post-secondary success. This is the one that you and I have talked about most, as well as a focal area around research and development and innovation, and then a focal area around workforce development. And all of these things are connected. And so the goal here is to make sure that the needs of one are being supported by the system that is doing the work downstream and upstream. In addition to these areas around K-12 learning and engagement, educators, higher ed, research, and workforce, we have an entire focus on strategic communications that is really cross-cutting across all of these focal areas, as well as a focus on data and accountability, so that the work that we're doing inside and across these areas is really data driven and targeted for impact.
Thank you. That's Very succinct. I like it.
It is an opportunity, again, to be in coalition with a community of experts and practitioners who are working across all of the areas that I just described, and really meant to be a framework for how we can sustain alignment across this really diverse cross-sector group of stakeholders who are required to make STEM education and workforce successful.
Well, definitely more to come. Definitely more to come. We will definitely be talking with you guys about your progress as you move along. So I think people can look forward to reading about it in our publication and on the website and any other medium, podcasts, webinars. So the summer is upon us. So closing thoughts on what do you got planned for the rest of the summer?
Trying not to melt in the DC heat is one thing that we're all working on here in DC.
Yeah.
But for SOA, we're really excited to be coming to the end of what was a really intense workshop series where we went from this beautiful vision that we were just talking about to really having partners raise their hands around collaborating together in really intentional ways. And so by the end of the summer, we'll have some co-created implementation plans that we're going to be excited to demonstrate really what the strategic alignment can achieve across organizations. So it's going to be an exciting moment by the end of the summer.
Thank you, Dr. Rodriguez.
Thank you so much.